A serger is a machine that creates the finished seams you see on ready-made garments such as sweatshirts and t-shirts. They're all serger made. But using this machine only to serge knits is like using a microwave to heat water. My guest today must have a magic wand hidden in her back pocket since she can transform seemingly ordinary serging into magic. Welcome, Pam Maschie, serger magician.
Well, thank you, Nancy. I've never been called a magician before, and today we're going to certainly show others how they can become a magician too. Let's begin with a cover stitch, generally used to hem ready-made garments. This stitch can transform any work into mystifying shadow work accents.
Magical serger techniques, that's what's coming up next on Sewing with Nancy.
Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest-airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, a complete line of sewing, quilting, and embroidery machines and sergers. Baby Lock, for the love of sewing. Madeira, specializing in embroidery, quilting, and special effect threads, because creativity is never black and white. Koala Sewing Cabinets, hand-built in the USA by American craftsmen, customized for you. Clover, makers of sewing, knitting, quilting, and embroidery products for over 25 years. Experience the Clover difference. Amazing designs and Class A needles.
Before learning the tricks of the trade of working with a serger, it's important to have a review of the basic stitches. Now, if you were with us during the first program of this series, Pam and I worked with the overlock, flat lock, and rolled edge stitches, traditional serger stitches that are on the edge of the fabric.
Correct.
Now we're going to change to a cover stitch, and on ready-mades you'll see this cover stitch on hems. This is the perfect hem because on the right side it's visible as two stitches. It looks like a double needle stitching. On the flip side there's one looper, it's called the cover looper, and it covers the raw edge. I would fold the fabric and then stitch from the right side, and here's a close-up of serging along the edge. And notice I'm using a fabric guide to guide the width of the hem so that I will cover the underneath side. You can't see the underneath side on all fabric, so it's important to sew a test, and when you're done, then that raw edge should be hidden underneath that area. The setup of a cover stitch is unique. It has a special plate that Pam can show you. It has a special looper, and you can use two needles in various positions.
Correct. And you might want to check on your serger because not all sergers are capable of doing a chain and cover stitch. So make sure that your machine is capable of doing that. And we are going to be sewing with a flatbed sewing plate. We do have the flatbed sewing plate in position. We also have the two needles positioned in the chain needle position and cover stitch position, moving them to the front position for stitching. We are using the chain looper, and again, that's going to be found in the bottom part of our machine, just where we found those other loopers for overlock stitching.
So one looper.
One looper.
Follow your owner's manual. I always have to check it. Pam knows it by memory, but I do check my owner's manual for each setting. And when I did the stitching, I just simply used all-purpose thread in the needles and also in the chain looper. And I had different colors here just to show you the example, but on a hemming I'd use all three colors. Mystifying shadow work.
Now, mystifying shadow work, what we've done is we want to have that chain looper thread shadowing through to the front side or showing through. So here we've placed a heavier thread in our chain looper.
And let me just show how that, we've used a texturized nylon thread in a dark color. You can see the navy blue shade and how it shadows through the batiste. Well, let me get it shadowed through correctly. There you go. And just a hint of shadow work
that shows through. And then of course you could use your regular sewing thread in your two needles. And again, instead of having to sew on the edge of our fabric, we're going to be stitching in the middle of our fabric. So then simply draw lines or position your fabric into the machine flat and stitch. That's all there is to it.
We're not hemming, you're making decorative effects.
We're just making a decorative effect at this point. Whether you're using it for decorative effects on home deck projects Or if you're going to be using it for hemming, here again you can see that there's that darker color that's shadowing through your fabrics.
If you wanted to make parallel lines, all you just have to do is, which we've used frequently in our other first program of the series, just use the presser foot width.
Exactly, as your guide.
So you could align the presser foot
right along the outside edge. And again, there isn't any reason for having to draw the lines if you use your presser foot as the outside edge as a guide. And depending upon where your needles are positioned, will also give you a different width or spacing between each of those stitches.
And so now you can see that you can hem, or you can create this mystifying shadow work, all with the basic cover stitch. I hope you've enjoyed that. Smocking and little dresses go hand in hand. The time-honored art of hand-stitching a gridded pattern that simultaneously creates gathers and a design was an art form long before sewing machines came on the scene. Introduce the serger to the smocking world and presto, a sleight of hand transformation. No more hand stitching, gathering by a serger and decorative stitches by machine provide a magical approach to this heirloom accent. I have to admit, when I saw this project that Pam made, it really piqued my interest because I'm soon to be a grandmother of a little girl, and this will be just a great little project to make. And here you can see the charming smocking. It looks like it's a handwork, but nothing of the sort, Pam.
Not at all. And congratulations, by the way.
Oh, thank you. And so to make the smocking, what we're going to do is use this cover stitch with some changes to, not to the thread exactly, but to the differential feed. Now, kind of a funny term, but to referencing the feed dogs on the machine. I've removed the foot from my machine to show you the traditional feed dogs biting. You know, these are dogs.
And this is just to show you what the changes are. You will be sewing with your presser foot on, correct?
Yes, exactly. And I tighten the feed dogs. Now watch how much more the feed dogs bite. They really come up and move at a faster rate. So put your foot back on, which Pam has, and she's going to show you what it changes the fabric.
Correct. Now here we have it set. The differential feed is set at the normal setting, and as we stitch, it's just going to give us a chain stitch, a cover stitch that is again completely flat. Nothing different than what we're used to serging right here. Then what I'm going to do is raise this differential feed and also lengthen my stitch. It's important to be able to lengthen the stitch and increase the differential feed, which gives us that full-featured differential feed technique. Now, as I stitch, watch what happens. My fabric is going to be pulled up, and it gives me the gathering that I want.
So we went from an end setting of the differential feed, or the normal setting, however your serger may be set, to the highest level, which is number 2 on the machines that we're working on.
Correct.
Now after you've stitched that first row, that's the row that's easy.
Yes, so we're just going to stitch the first row, and here I have several rows already stitched because I wanted you to see exactly how, as Nancy said, the first row is the easy row. The next rows are going to be how you guide them in is going to be very important. Again, we're going to be using the outside edge of our presser foot as a guide, and again, depending upon where we have our needles positioned, will give us that different width or determine the width between our stitches. So now as we stitch, again, our differential feed is increased to 2. Our stitch length is at number 4. And as I stitch, my right hand is going to help walk my fabric into the machine and keep the edge of the fabric even with my left hand, and I continue to stitch. And as you can see, it creates those beautiful little tucks and gathers that are on my fabric. So then I again continue to stitch row after row and creating a piece of fabric that then is going to be large enough for the yoke or the sleeves that I'm going to be inserting this into.
And if you should by chance stitch down one little tuck, it's okay.
It is okay, yes, absolutely.
And here's a sample that has the initial smocking. Now you would now do the stitching at the machine. Here you can see I'm following along one of the cover stitch lines using a decorative stitch, rayon thread in the needle. Do a little test sample on a specific fabric so you can decide which decorative stitch to use, but an open stitch is really appropriate. And after you've done several rows, crosswise rows on the garment, you can see the finished result. Here we have, again, 2 open stitches alternating, and it is sweet.
Very sweet.
And so a combination of modern technology with heirloom effect, it's charming. So we have this sleight of hand smocking. It's a great technique to try on your serger and sewing machine. A serger magic show wouldn't be complete without pin tucks. Okay, there's never been a serging magic show before, yet if such a show should be organized, these pin tucks would be a star feature. We call them incredible pin tucks, since you will not believe how simple they are to create. With 1 row of serger stitching, the tuck magically appears with perfect precision. We have a beautiful christening gown with the tucks along the side, which you show, and they're pressed in one direction on either side, and again we're using the cover stitch, but the stitching is much smaller than the 2 preceding techniques. And Pam, you've made some changes to your machine.
Yes, we have, Nancy. What we've done is we have moved the needle from the far left position now to the center position, and we've also attached the pin tuck presser foot with the guide.
Now, you may find this with your serger or maybe an accessory foot to purchase, and the pin tuck foot has an area on the underside allowing the fabric to be forced in that section, and the guide does that for you. And you'll see that on Pam's machine in just a minute, but it's a raised bar, so the fabric is then forced in that underside, and you're stitching over the raised bar. The pin tucks then form from that, but there's one more adjustment you'll need on your machine.
Yes, what we do is we've increased the chain looper tension, and what this will do is it will draw the fabric together on the underside, creating that beautiful tuck.
And I'll show you what happens in that underside. Look, we purposely use blue thread, and you can see in the past it was lying flat, and now because Pam tightened the tension, it just brought those threads together. So the combination of the pin tuck foot, the guide, and tightening the tension, this is what you get. But now to sew it.
Okay, and on that garment that we made, we simply take a piece of fabric twice the length of the finished piece of fabric. And then as we stitch these, we cut them in half. So we're simply going to stitch 1 pin tuck, then again use the outside edge of our presser foot as a guide. That presser foot, the outside edge of our presser foot, becomes a great measuring tool with many of these techniques without having to remeasure each and every time that you're going to be stitching. So now you stitch all of the lines for your pin tucks, press them in one direction, and you end up with those magical pin tucks.
Cut it in half, as you said, so that you're just sewing long sections.
Long rows of fabric, yes.
But then there's one more little miraculous change we can make, and that with most pin tuck feet, you'll also get a second guide, which Pam is going to snap on your machine. And why don't we watch you do? Here's the guide, and Pam, why don't you show everyone?
We've already placed the yarn into the opening of the guide. We're simply going to open the side door, slide off the pin tuck guide, and attach our cord guide right to the front of the machine. Close the door, it holds it in place, and then as we stitch over this yarn, we place the yarn under our fabric and just stitch. And the machine again is going to guide that yarn in right between those 2 needles. It's just like magic.
Now we're using batiste fabric. Of course, you'd have to have some shadow through to have these raised pin tucks.
Yes.
If you would like the color to show.
Show through.
If you want the color to show, or you could just make them raised just by putting matching yarn underneath. So whether you would like the pressed pin tucks or the raised pin tucks by placing yarn underneath, the serger makes an ideal machine for accurate and neat sewing. Gone are the days of only correlating serging techniques with knit fabrics. Bridal Illusion is the star of this magical serger technique. You might think that serging on lightweight illusion or tulle fabric is an impossible task. Disappearing fabric is what makes this elegant technique a reality. Here are some insights into this serger trick. The bag that you just saw was created with 2 layers of fabric, bridal illusion or tulle, with the serger stitching and then fabric underneath. And the stitching that you see is the chain stitch. Now, chain stitch in general serging ideas is used as a top stitching idea, and here you can see it just as a top stitch or as a seam. Rarely do I think of a serger as seaming woven fabrics, but it does work well with 1 stitch. And I'll just show you right here that I can just sew a seam.
And it's a very stable stitch as well. So when you're stitching on knit fabrics or woven fabrics, they're not going to stretch. And by creating that single line of stitching, the serger straight stitch, you could even press that seam open if you wanted to.
And I'll just kind of finger press it for you. And the setup is different. And Pam, why don't you go over the setup so our viewers can appreciate this?
Very good. Before we've gone from 2 needles, one on the left and one on the far right, to the pin tucks when we did the needles one right next to the other. And now we're just using a single needle in the machine and creating a chain stitch. The chain stitch and the chain looper are what we use in order to create that single line of stitching.
So you just take out one of the needles from the cover stitch, and you have to adjust the tension a little bit
Slightly,
to
yes.
the chain stitch. Again, that owner's manual comes in
Very handy.
really handy. And then you can do the stitching. And the decorative stitch is the chain looper thread. So when I stitched this little sample, I was stitching, you can see the navy blue, I was stitching from the top side. So the decorative effect comes undercover.
Again, it's pretty magic because you're placing the wrong side of your fabric up, and as you stitch, you turn it over and magically that decorative stitch appears.
Now, the technique that we have for you, the sheer illusion, is to serge right on the bridal veiling. And you can see it's lightweight fabric, and I have it on my tabletop. It's almost difficult to see. The disappearing fabric that I referenced is water-soluble mesh, generally used for embroidery. This disappears in water. It's made out of cornstarch, so it's an eco-friendly disappearing fabric, and you make a sandwich. The water-soluble mesh being your bread, and you're not going to have too much protein here with that bridal veiling, but that's what you have. Now, to hold it all together, I'm just going to place this down on the table, and you can use a little glue stick to kind of hold the layers together, or perhaps if you'd like to use a spray
adhesive works very well.
And then you can grid however close together you'd like to create this. And Pam, you have 30 weight thread in your looper and your needle.
Correct. In both the needle and the looper, we have the 30 weight thread, and that's going to make our stitch stand up just a little bit more. We do have the fabric gridded, as you mentioned, and you can also then just use the markings that are on your presser foot as a guide and follow that in under the presser foot. And we continue to stitch one row right after another. And I just generally kind of go from one side of the fabric to the other.
And notice Pam doesn't raise her presser foot between stitching.
No, and that's real important because sometimes when you raise it, you forget to put it down, and your stitches are not going to be equal when you forget to put your presser foot down. So we continue to stitch row after row on top of this water-soluble mesh, and Nancy, you have the finished sample there.
You can see the light green stitching on top of the mesh. Well, we save this for our technique as the last magic because we have disappearing fabric. We have a little basin of water and our sample, and we place it in the water, and hocus pocus, alakazam, we can think of any type of
magic word we want to say.
We just let it soak a little bit.
And it does work also very, very well. When you run it under the water, when it's real warm water, it's going to dissolve a little bit faster.
So we'll let that dissolve, and then here you will see, presto, the fabric. Layer it, and then you have sheer illusion. A A few weeks ago, you met Peggy Need, our heart-to-heart participant. You may recall that Peggy is a fellow sewer, and like me, she has made it her goal to live a heart-healthy lifestyle. I hope that you have joined us in this quest to not only improve your sewing and quilting techniques, but also your quality of life. Peggy's a full-time occupational therapist, single mom, and caregiver for her son. With elevated cholesterol and triglyceride levels, she began incorporating healthy eating and more exercise into her already busy day. Let's see how far she's come since our last visit.
Jack, this way. The past couple months have been hard work, but my nurse practitioner says that the small steps I've been taking has really begun to pay off. My cholesterol is down, but I still have a little ways to go on my triglycerides. We got a new dog who really gets me up and moving each day. My nurse practitioner suggested 30 minutes of cardiovascular exercise each day. Walking the dog is a perfect exercise for me. I really enjoy working in my garden, and boy, can I ever work up a sweat. I spend a lot of time out here because I find working in the garden is not only good exercise, but it's also a good stress reliever. I've seen a positive difference in my important numbers such as blood pressure and cholesterol. My nurse practitioner and I both think that a change in my diet has also contributed to the success I've had so far. I've begun cooking healthier meals for myself and my family, and one of my favorites is broiled asparagus. I'm also reading food labels more closely and trying to focus on more protein and fewer carbs. I find sewing a useful way to make my son and the patients that I work with live life a little bit easier. It's also very relaxing for me and a great way to reduce stress.
You just saw Peggy working at her home and enjoying her home, but now she's joined us in a studio, and I'd like to welcome you back, Peggy, to the Sewing with Nancy Studios. And I was really pleased to hear that you're having better levels, better numbers. Congratulations.
Thank you, thank you. It is challenging, though, keeping up with the exercise. The diet has been easier, but when it's hot, the last thing I feel like doing is going outside and perspiring more.
Certainly.
So it's something that I continue to struggle with, my desire to not perspire as much, but just kind of bite the bullet, you have to.
Yes. Well, I think all of us who are wanting to exercise more and eat better, we have good weeks, and then we have weeks that aren't so good.
Yes,
So
that's true.
it's normal, and you can follow Peggy's weekly diary when you go to the Sewing with Nancy site. So you can certainly click on the Nancy's Corner and follow along. But one of the reasons you were chosen for the Heart to Heart Challenger is because you're a fellow sewer, and we saw Peggy sewing on the tape, and you were working on some jeans.
Yeah, my youngest son has muscular dystrophy and is in a power wheelchair. So one thing we found is he wants to look, you know, age appropriate, is to wear some jeans, and I just buy them in the larger size than what he would normally wear, and then take out the zipper and then just and take it down to the crotch just to make it easier for toileting and dressing, and then put in these Velcro tabs that just then makes it much easier.
And you used a little ponytail holder.
Sometimes some of the jeans, depending on the size or how Kyle's tummy feels at the time, we use the ponytail holder just to kind of fudge the waist and give him a little bit extra dimension if he needs to, and then otherwise without. But it's kind of an easy, cheap modification.
Well, great idea. And as we mentioned, Peggy is an occupational therapist, and I know from our conversations that you have modified things for your clients, and the remaking and modifying is an important part of your life, and it's an important part to many of our viewers as well.
Well, it saves money, too, if you can take something off the clearance rack
and
make it work instead of
exactly.
paying for adaptive clothing from a private store.
Well, Peggy, I thank you for being with us again, and Peggy's going to be joining us one more time, and it's during the last program of our series. But in the meantime, you can follow Peggy's progress and be inspired to make a commitment to begin your own Heart Healthy program. It's with the assistance of the American Heart Association's free online resource and tools. You can go to Sewing with Nancy, as I mentioned earlier, sewingwithnancy.com. Then you can click on Nancy's Corner, and you'll find information on the 2300 series section. I hope you'll do that and join me in doing this. Well, I thank you for joining us during this two-part series on magical serger techniques. Next time we'll have a new program. Thanks for joining me. Bye for now.
Nancy and Pam Massey have written a fully illustrated book entitled Magical Serger Techniques, which includes all the information from this two-part series. It's $14.99 plus shipping and handling. To order the book, call 800-336-8373 or visit our website at sewingwithnancy.com/2317. Order item number BK2317, Magical Serger Techniques, credit card orders only. To pay by check or money order, call the number on the screen for details. Visit Nancy's website at sewingwithnancy.com for more information on this program. Sewing with Nancy, TV's longest airing sewing and quilting program with Nancy Zieman, is made possible by Baby Lock, Madeira Threads, Koala Cabinets, Clover, Amazing Designs, and Classe Needles. Closed captioning funding provided by Rowenta. Sewing with Nancy is a co-production of Nancy Zieman Productions and Wisconsin Public Television.